Welcome to the Out of the Ashes podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Walerius, and today I have Courtney Cox with me. Welcome, Courtney.
Hi, Kristen. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad you could be with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I have been through quite a bit of trauma. However, I finally was able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's how I like to say it. And I now work in substance abuse and mental health as my career and help others that need treatment and help place them. So that's really been therapeutic for me, as well as helping others and really trying to save lives, and for others that have experienced difficulties in their life as well.
That's really cool. So tell
Well,
us a
thank
little bit
you.
about your story and what transpired that led to and brought you through all that trauma.
Sure. So my story is a little bit different from others because I have the most amazing family. I was raised in an amazing suburb. It was, kind of a bubble, but I knew life existed. But I had the best parents, so supportive. And so I thought that life was happiness and rainbows. And as long as you did the right thing, good things happen to you. Right. And so, morally, as long as you do the best you can, good things happen. And unfortunately, sometimes you get caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that has just happened to me a few times, to where eventually I put myself in the wrong place at the wrong time, because I didn't know. I became so mentally ill from the traumas that I had previously. And so at that point, what I realized is I could have all of the support in the world. I could have my parents by my side. I could have them in the hospital holding my hand. But at the end of the day, it was me that had to relive that in my brain. They couldn't erase it. And that's whenever the only person I could turn to that understood was God. And I was raised going to church, but really building that adult relationship with God was by far the most significant aspect of getting me through years of trauma and then years of not knowing how to live a life and not feel like a sex object. And so it's just really interesting to talk to college kids or parents to say, you can have this amazing support system. However, you do need to do everything that you can to prevent these bad situations from happening, because there is bad people out there, unfortunately. And so that's why my story is a little bit different, because a lot of people, they have to grow up and fend for themselves and not have parents around or adopted, and just a lot of other horror stories. And, God bless them for getting through it. And I was so blessed to have this amazing family and support system. But at the end of the day, they don't, your trauma relives in your brain over and over and over again. And as much as they want to empathize, they can only sympathize.
Right. Yep. And I think it's good to remember that nobody's story looks the same.
Absolutely.
And that just because your story looks different from my story doesn't mean they're less traumatic, and doesn't mean that they're less worth dealing with.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think everybody needs to know that it is their own story and to own it. But what's incredible about speaking with other people that have gone through, you know, a significant amount of um, just life, we can all get together, and that's how we can we can learn from each other. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
beautiful part about it.
Absolutely. I think I know for me, and it's kind of sounding like you are the same way, and I know that there's got to be other people that are like us, so that did come from a very good family, and you grow up with this belief in God, and that doesn't make you immune to issues and trauma. And
Right.
and it would be so easy to blame God.
Yes. Yes, I
And
did that for a
yeah,
little bit. Yep.
yeah.
Because
And
I thought I was doing the right thing. I was following the commandments. I was
right,
following everything in church, but that's not life.
right. Yeah. And I think coming out of a situation when you did have that kind of background, it adds its own complexity to the situation, because what you know about God and to be true, you have to reconcile what happened to you.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so you're not blaming God for it, but you still have to reconcile what you know to be true about God with what happened.
Right.
And I think that is not an easy situation at all.
Oh, absolutely. And asking, I think the biggest question was because most of my trauma is sexual abuse. And, um, and it started, um, in college,
Mhm.
but it continued to happen. And I was not personally looking for that. Um, and so I just felt like a sex symbol walking around, and that's
Mhm.
all I was good for. Um, Instead of, being a woman that, is very caring, and the qualities that I
Right.
have carrying inside of me. But then, and asking God, why me? And then, and then is the victimizing, why me and why this, and kind of not understanding. Um, and then whenever things happen so much and you don't deal with it, because I didn't for a long time. Um I was very quiet. I didn't tell a soul. And I started believing it. And so I had 2 to 3 bad things happen to me. Two of them were severe rapes. And I think not vocalizing it is, I after that I just didn't care. I just accepted that's what I'm good for.
Mhm.
And so I partied a ton, and that just led down a whole other path that was not good. But I think so many people are scared to talk about
Right.
something so serious that has happened to them. And and I went to the hospital for both of them, rape exam, everything. And so my parents knew. But as far as counseling, my mom kept saying, we've got to get you in counseling. And I just put it off, put it off, put it off, and was living away from home. And so they didn't know. I mean, I sounded fine on the phone, but it was just drinking. And years earlier, I had a severe brain surgery, and I was in a bad car accident. I wasn't the driver, I was the passenger. And I had a horrible concussion, and I was prescribed pain medicine, especially due to the brain surgery I had, because it was complicated with that. And, or it could have had complications from that. And, I became addicted to pain medicine, and that was my out for everything.
And I think that one of the things I know in my situation, one of the reasons that I didn't want to talk about it was because I judged myself and I felt like
Oh,
others were going to judge
absolutely.
me.
Oh, yeah. When I looked in the mirror, I mean, I would shower 3 or 4 times a day. It was disgusting. I would see this horrible person, and I didn't want to go out in public. I lost so many friends because I shut them off.
Mhm.
And it just became just me. And that's not a good place to be.
Right. It took me I my I started going through my situation when I was in college as well. And so I was in my 20s,
Right.
and it's just within the last 3 years, and I'm almost 46. So it's
Wow.
just been within the last 3 years that I've started talking about it and saying, "You know what? If you judge me, that's your problem. That's not mine."
Yeah.
And that's when I started to be able to heal. Is when I finally said, "You know what? I'm not going to worry about what somebody else has to say about my situation. I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to be real."
Well, that's fabulous. And honestly, it's people just like you, Kristen, that have pushed me to finally talk about my story. I mentioned I work in mental health and substance abuse,
Mhm.
but I don't share my story. I'm there because I want to be there.
Right.
And but that's where I work. I don't do that. However, over the past year, I have done just so much emotional, spiritual, physical growth in a positive way that people keep asking me, what happened? And I think I just surrendered it all. When you carry the weight of years of trauma and you know, finally decide that you're not going to go on the streets in Oak Cliff, which is like the worst part of Dallas in the world, to score drugs, to know that you could potentially be gang raped and robbed, which
Mhm.
did happen. Yet I still went back because I was trying to numb myself so much. And when you realize that the second the high is gone and you have to still look at yourself in the mirror, it's
Mhm.
time to change things. And I think, honestly, with me, it was tons of prayer because I I was just in this tunnel where there was darkness. Every day I lived a day at a time. I never thought about the future because that was way too overwhelming and I didn't want to. I mean, I had a couple of suicide attempts. It's a very dark place. And so the biggest question to God that I struggled with is why? And why are you keeping me here to deal with this? And tragedy on tragedy on tragedy. Um, my mom said the only reason that you have survived everything that you have is because God has a purpose and you have to share your story. And she has told me that and continue to. And friends have told me that. Very few friends that I've told my story to or parts of. But that, scientifically, there's really not a reason I should be here, but I am. And so, since I am, I want to use that and every bit in me to try to help the next person. And
Mhm.
if I touch one life or save one life by doing so, to me, it's all worth it. I
Yeah,
don't mind going through it if it helps somebody else.
absolutely.
I don't. And I think that I had to learn that sometimes, I like to think in my head that gives his strongest soldiers the hardest experiences. But That's something that just helps me out. But I definitely do feel that I would be doing the world a disservice if I was not sharing my story, because I do want to help others so much in any
Mhm.
way possible.
What would you say would be the biggest lesson that you've learned about God, about life, love, whatever?
That's a great question. I would say the biggest lesson I've learned is to not take anything for granted. And the reason that I say that is you don't realize how blessed you are until you don't have a roof over your head
Mhm.
or you don't feel safe. And those things can be taken in a heartbeat and it can take forever to restore. And you don't realize how blessed you truly are to have things, which I think things now are, you know, they're they're just things. But love, things that you can't see, love, safety, having air conditioning, having heat, those types of things, that is something that I never thought I would cherish so much, because I was never in a situation where I didn't know where I was going to sleep. I had, I knew I had a family and a roof over my head, and if I needed something, I was okay. And but I chose to put myself in situations where that would be a problem. I didn't think it all the way through. So and on the other side with God, I think something that's very important is, I think it's smart. I think it's very good to take your kids to church and grow up with the morals and values. However, when you're an adult, that relationship with God does change. And I I am very grateful for my experience, because I'm so close with God, and I don't go out to others, preaching. I talk to him in my head, or I'll say, I'll pray for you, or, you know, so on. But I know that he's there 24/7 and that he gets it. And to have that and to have faith in knowing that, I never feel alone. And I think that has been, on top of treatment, and the support from my family, having God the center of my life has by far been the most important factor for me to heal and move forward and believe that the future is bright, because it is. I'm at the end of the tunnel and there's so much brightness, and I can look forward to the future and plan things that I want to do and know that I can do it. And I can't remember the last time I've seen light. I mean, my dad asked me a couple of months ago how I was doing when I saw my parents, and I teared up and I told him, I said, Daddy, this is the first time that I am not living a day at a time and I can see a bright future. And, he cheered up too and gave him a big hug. But it's just been a rough 20s. I'm 31 now. But I made it to the other side. And I do have hope and faith that everything will work out. Now, is life going to be easy? Absolutely not. However, if I have, if I'm making the right decisions, the best decisions that I can make, if I do right by myself, by my career, by my significant other, by my dogs, by my family, and most importantly, by God, I know I'll have the strength to get through it.
I preface this question partly just to remind my viewers, but partly so that you know where I'm coming from with this question. But when I talk about failure, I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as something that leads to something better, that it's something that helps us to learn something. So, what would you consider to be your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
I've had many failures.
Me too,
I
girl. Me too.
I know. I think, and this is so true, and this is why I love speaking to young, especially young women, that young adults, um, because I try to see the good in everybody. So my
Mhm.
biggest failure is trusting everybody, literally. If
Mhm.
it comes out of their mouth that, you know, that I'm safe, then I trust them. I'm safe. Um, and that has that, and that does not mean to not trust others at all. Um, that just means that um, you have to make very good judgment calls.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. Even though the other side of you are saying, but
Yep.
he's so cute and he sounds like it and I'm different, I'm not different from any other girl. I just heard about his past, how am I different? But somehow that that came into my,
Yeah.
but not what he wouldn't do that to me. He might have, I look him up and all these felonies, but to me he wouldn't do that. No, of course he will, and he did. So my point is that I I became way too trusting of
Mhm.
everybody. And that is the hardest lesson and the biggest lesson I've had to learn and overcome, because I'm very talkative. I love other people. I want to save the world. However, that's where boundaries come in,
Yep.
and you have to put up those boundaries. And the poor guy I'm dating right now, he's absolutely amazing. But we met through a mutual friend,
Mhm.
very, very, very good friend. So eventually I knew what was safe, and
Mhm.
but he had to bear with me, because just because my friend says it's safe and he says it's safe, I need to make sure it's safe.
Right.
So you have to, and then pray about it,
Mhm.
and sometimes you do have to flip that coin and see, if you're going to go for it or not. But at the end of the day, if you know you have to live your life, you can't stay at home and stay in a corner. But like I said, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And
Mhm.
your intuition, we
Yep.
all have it. And to listen to that thing, like, I mean, like nothing else,
Mhm.
because when you start listening, you have to listen. It may not be the answer you want, but it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that trusting yourself is very difficult, trusting that you do have the ability to figure it out and
Well,
be able
right.
to see
And
some of those signs.
well, right, because I can't at 31 call my mom for every situation I'm in and saying, "What do I do?"
Right.
I mean, I can't. If somebody's breaking in the house, I don't have time to do that. It's
Mhm.
just whatever you want, take it. I just, whatever. And you just have to learn how to trust yourself. And that's a very difficult thing whenever you've made extremely poor decisions in the past.
Mhm. Yep. So, if you could step into my shoes, what is one question that you would have asked that I didn't?
Huh, that's a great question. I guess what I would ask is, since you've had so much trouble with men and feeling viewed as a sex object, how did you get to the point to having a serious relationship with a man again, or a healthy relationship with a
Right.
man, period?
Yeah. And how would you answer that?
It's, I never thought it would happen. Um, I wasn't looking for it. I was done with men. I couldn't trust them. And it wasn't men. I don't want to put them in a category,
Right.
but they're stronger than me. So, um, uh, that was just, I could trust myself. I knew myself, and I didn't have it in me to put that trust in anybody else. And I moved on with my life. And before I knew it, my good friend Tony was telling me about his best friend now, which I've known Tony for 13 years. And so, very reputable guy.
Mhm.
And talking about his best friend. And I'm like, okay. And of course, my first question is, why is he single? Because if he's in his if he's in his 30s
Yep.
and not married, what's going on? And what's wrong with him? But he had a breakup from um a long-term relationship, and so and wasn't in a rush, and he thought he was going to be alone forever because he was just content with himself. And so we started talking because we were in different cities at the time, and really we were able to build that foundation of friendship.
Hmm.
And yes, he knew what I looked like, but there wasn't any like sexting pictures or any of that silly stuff. It was literally getting to know each other.
Right.
And that was so important. And
Mhm.
I didn't realize how important that was, um, for how the situation just aligned was very beautiful. And how I was able to learn about Andrew, my boyfriend. But I mean, hours we would talk on the phone. And so it wasn't over texting. I could hear his voice, I could see what he was doing, we could FaceTime and so
Hmm.
on. And it was just about life. And building that foundation was so much more beautiful than, tell me, take off your shirt and show me your sexy
Right.
body. But it was. And that's the only way I I think God had it all planned out, and that is the only way it would have worked. Now, I will tell you one thing that is beneficial is I don't think I would appreciate all of the little things that Andrew does if I hadn't gone through what I did. I think I would expect it instead of appreciate it.
Hmm.
And that is one thing that I do thank my trauma for. So I do little things in my head sometimes where I just thank my trauma for some things. Not for everything, but for some
Right.
things, because a lot of lessons come out of it. Um and I'm not, I'm really laid back. I'm not going to get upset if we disagree on where we're going to go eat. It's just, I don't care.
Right.
I'm just happy to have food. So,
Right.
it's just those little things that that we all take for granted.
Hmm.
That I'm constantly reminded how blessed I am.
Yeah. And I think
So,
that one thing that as women, we need to be reminded that that friendship is so important.
oh my gosh, it is. And that's what and I'm divorced actually, and that's for another segment. But um but I told Andrew, I said, I don't care about a ring. I mean, I just want a partner. I just want
Mm,
somebody that I can trust and
mhm,
laugh and have fun with. And I will tell you, that's all our relationship is. And it's beautiful. It's not hard. It's so easy.
mhm.
And it's like, how is it this easy? It shouldn't be. But I made it always hard before. And it should be this way. And it's beautiful. And so, and I never thought this would happen in my entire life, ever, ever. I mean, I would bet on it. So it's just, it's amazing, the circle of life, truly, and experiences, and how 10 year ago Courtney was such a brat and drinking and saying, oh, he's not that cute. Well, he probably was a great guy, or whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've learned so much.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being here with us today. And thank you
Yeah,
for
thank
being
you
willing
so
to
much for
share your
having me.
story.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Out of the Ashes. Remember, if you have a topic you would like me to cover, contact me on my website or email. Have a great day and God bless.